Hello there, my name's Esther Snippa from SpeakerHub. SpeakerHub is Europe's fastest growing network of speakers, trainers, moderators, and webinar hosts, and we help connect speakers with event organizers from around the world. In this podcast series, we interview some of our most interesting speakers, and they talk to us about their projects and their insights on how to become better communicators. In this podcast today, we're talking with Alberto Alemanno, and Alberto is a social innovator and public interest lawyer. And he's going to talk to us about how we can adapt our content to make a bigger impact on our audiences. So, Alberto, to start us off, can you tell us what inspired you to create ELab Europe?
ELab Europe is an attempt made by an academic like me to possibly fill the gap between academic thinking and reality by creating some synergies between scholars and policymakers to engage underrepresented citizens, NGOs, and possibly lobby in the public interest. So our objective at ELab Europe is to promote public participation, civic engagement in Europe, and possibly beyond that, by experimenting new forms of participatory democracy and advocacy in the public interest. So we have three major initiatives at ELab Europe. We aim at educating Europeans, so increase literacy when it comes to the functioning of the EU. We register a massive open online course in order to achieve that objective. The second one is experimenting Europe. So we train young students in the so-called European Clinic. They learn which are the major avenues of participation in the EU and how to represent underrepresented groups. And the third mission is empowering Europeans through a new platform which is called the Good Lobby that enable professionals to provide on a pro bono basis their skills to civil society organizations mainly active in the European decision-making process.
Can you tell us what have been some of the effects of ELab Europe?
Well, I would say that the first effect of ELab Europe has been to build an audience of young and less young citizens willing to spend some time into thinking how to improve the European Union, how to make the EU a less bureaucratic organization and more a bottom-up organization or reality. So we have quite a broad community of individuals who find themselves somehow represented by what ELab Europe is trying to do when improving literacy about the EU and talking about Europe perhaps according to a different narrative, which is a bit less institutional and a bit closer to their daily life.
And how did you get started with this? What inspired you to start ELab Europe?
Well, the source of inspiration of ELab Europe comes from my experience as an educator, as a teacher. I spent a lot of time in the classroom. I had the chance to see the so-called millennials generation popping up and realizing that this new generation is very much driven by purpose, by social cause, and their desire not only to learn about the subject matter of the EU or any other subject, but possibly trying to see how they could use the knowledge I have in order to pursue their own missions, what they really cared about. It could be one policy area like the protection of the environment. It could be about their own professional goals. But at the end of the day, they were more driven than in the past. So I wanted to possibly channel this desire for action outside of the conventional academic channels.
Okay, so how do you help facilitate these millennials in making change in Europe?
Well, I would say that our last project, the Good Lobby, is possibly the one that presents the highest potential in channeling their potential, the potential of the youngsters, The massive open online course, which is available online, give them a basic understanding of how the European Union works and how it can provide them an opportunity. But is the Good Lobby as a platform connecting their talents with NGOs that really provide them the chance to test their own knowledge and experience and to gain a first-hand experience of what it's like to interact with the European institutions in order to represent the interest of civil society organizations that might not have the knowledge or rigor for interacting with the institutions as they would big corporations and lobby groups.
Can you talk to us about how to talk to millennials?
Well, I think you have to talk to millennials as you talk to anybody else. We should not put them on the top of a statue and sort of transforming them in a sort of new animal species. But certainly millennials are different than previous generations. They have been living in a very technological world since ever. They have been living in a society where corporations are striving to achieve non-economic objectives through corporate social responsibility. So they are becoming more and more sensitive to what is the corporate identity of that particular brand before making a choice. They are also quite apolitical, so they don't necessarily they're not necessarily sensitive to political language. And finally, I would say they're extremely demanding in the way in which you share information with them. So just to give you an example, giving them basic knowledge, basic information might not be enough. They want to have that information packaged in a way that is sexy, that speaks to them, that is kind of snappy and smart.
Can we move on to talk a little bit about the public speaking that you do? Can you tell me a bit about what your objectives are?
Yes, I'm in education because I love teaching. And I believe anyone who likes teaching is because he or she loves public speaking. So this is my case. I've been teaching since I'm 24, when I became teaching assistant at the College of Europe in Bruges. And since then, I've been teaching in many universities all across the world, at Georgetown, NYU, Harvard, Moscow, Tokyo. I'm visiting professor in those universities. But on the side of my teaching, I've always been doing some public speaking for civil society organizations, sometimes corporations, and I really like doing so. So most of my talks revolve around my own research, which itself revolves around the EU. So I talk about Europe, about how the EU works, how it can possibly provide opportunities for citizens, but also for companies. But sometimes I depart from my own comfort zone research area and I venture into new topics. And I had the chance to talk at TEDx a few times, and I never talk in TEDx about my own research. I always been talking about different kind of subjects that really make me passionate about, because I think that public speaking should also be inspirational. And that's possibly what I try to do when I talk in public, is to inspire my audience by provoking them a little bit, so trying to make them think out of the box and giving them some avenues for change for their life or improvement. So I think the word that I'm always try to keep in mind when opening my mouth in front of a big or a smaller audience is try to inspire these people in front of you.
And how do you do that? How do you catch their attention and keep it during your talk?
Well, I think that the best way to start any form of public speaking is to know who is in front of you. So you need to clearly adapt to your target audience. And I think this is really a talent. It's not something you learn, it's something you have to feel. You need to be capable to adapt to the intensity of the way in which people look at you or listen to you or lose attention to what you're saying in order to immediately adapt to what they want to hear somehow. So that's possibly the art. There's an art of public speaking, but not really a science. Of course, you learn about techniques over time, and as an educator, I need to learn techniques in order to keep the attention very, very high in the classroom. But in public speaking in general, I think is all come down to what you feel during your talk. And to reply to your question, I think the recipe for effective public speaking comes down to being capable to merge very objective presentation of data and facts. So you need to be informative, but you have to merge that informational component with a more emotional one, something you really feel strong about. And if you can strike the right balance between the informational part and the emotional one, then you might really get a splash.
And then as the speaker, how do you balance speaking to people's emotions and then also giving them the data?
I believe that although it's very sensitive to do so, the speaker has to find this more emotional, empathic way of connecting to the public. And this boils down to identifying personal stories that might speak to the audience, because the audience might have experienced the same, or because it might be sensitive to the very same circumstances or scenarios that are described by the speakers. But there's no magic formula. I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think it depends very much on the topic you want to present. It depends again on the audience. And once more, I think that the magic of a good, let's say, speech, public speech, really really has to do with a sort of connection and interaction between the speaker and the audience. The speaker alone is not enough, and the audience alone either. So you have to find ways to interact and to build bridges between the two, even though the public, by definition, is going to be silent for a while, at least during the presentation itself. Then there could be actual, tangible interactions. So despite the, let's say, unilateral monologue type intervention of the speaker and the public should be able to bond.
Okay, so it's all about building connections with the audience, even though the audience can't necessarily respond.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have some advice for speakers that you could offer?
Well, I believe that speakers, they need, first of all, feel comfortable vis-a-vis the audience, but also vis-a-vis the topic they were asked to talk about. So I believe this is a sort of precondition for allowing the speaker to have a chance with the audience. Once we know that the speaker feels quite at ease in front of that audience and quite at ease in relation to the topic, I think that it is up to the speaker to work very carefully on the drafting of the speech, trying to identify a tone, a language he might be familiar with, but also comfortable with, and then train, meaning prepping. I think prepping is essential. Once you master not only the contents, but also the form, the way in which you're going to convey the message, you're going to do much better. This doesn't necessarily mean that you need to know by heart your speech. This might actually backfire. It's just too perfect, too neat, and not empathetic, meaning it's not felt. So I don't think we should overdo in terms of preparation, but we should reach that stage of preparation that enable each of us to feel comfortable when on stage, and also to have a sort of safety net, meaning remembering what you want to say and how you want to say it, but without necessarily knowing everything by heart. So usually the prepping should entail two repetitions. So you have to repeat in public to emulate your own talk, to simulate your talk at least twice, but possibly no more than that. Because if you do more, then you will reach that stage that I define as possibly counterproductive.
And then you get into the being too perfect, too planned out, and not empathetic enough.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks for that advice. I have one last question for you. What's coming up next, or what are you working on at the moment?
At the moment, I'm working full-time on the launch of the Good Lobby, this platform that connects professionals, academics, students with civil society organizations. So this is a skill-shared platform that tries to leverage on the potential that each of us has. We all have talents in doing something. And if we are able to share this talent and this potential with organizations who might have some need, we could possibly address the current inequalities existing in the policy process. So I'm very concerned as a citizen, as a researcher, as an educator, in the way in which big policy discussions take place in Europe and in other parts of the world. We could discuss about how to regulate data protection, about how to regulate fracking and non-conventional oil, about how to reform our policy vis-a-vis immigrants. Every single time a new policy debate takes off, we all feel that there's an imbalance between organized interests who speak very loudly and they share the same language with the policymakers, and all the others, usually the citizens, who don't really have a voice, or if they do, is not really a voice that is heard by the policymakers. And this gives rise to inequality. It might perpetuate inequality. And I think there is a way to tap into the potential of each of us in order to address that inequality. And the Good Lobby tries to achieve that objective, or at least to make a first step, enabling anyone from one day to another to gain that kind of experience, defend your position. So the challenge is really to democratize lobbying, enabling anyone to speak louder when it comes to the policy process, and to engage anyone, either by acting alone, what I call citizen lobbying, or by supporting another existing organization, which is still part of a citizens lobbying attempt. The objective is to make it more inclusive, so to make sure that everybody will have a voice at the table. This is not necessarily the case today. Woody Allen used to say that success in life is basically about showing up. At least 80% of success is about showing up. If this is true, then we have to make sure that everybody has a seat at the table. So there will be a seat waiting for anyone who has something to say about a particular issue. So we want to create those conditions, which, if you want, are preconditions, pre-requirements for having a democratic debate about issues that affect our individual and daily life.
We wish you the best of luck with it.
Thanks. I really need it.
Alberto, I'd like to thank you for speaking with me today.
Thanks to you. I wish you also good luck with Speaker Hub, the great initiative. I'm a big believer and supporter, and I hope you're going to be able to democratize public speaking and spread it out.
Oh, thank you so much. If you're interested in reading the transcription of this interview or finding out more about Alberto as a speaker, please visit us at www.speakerhub.com. This has been Esther Sniva, and thank you for listening.